Afternoon, everybody. I'm not doing PowerPoint slides.
I told you already, coming with it already, yeah? So Michelle, I first met Michelle a few. She didn't know me. I was just in the audience, but a few years ago, in one of her other roles in a very senior leadership role. So when my daughter started to go into school, I decided that I had to become a governor. And when I did become a governor, it was because there was lack of representation of black and female and male governors on the board. And so to be at my very first governor meeting with my sort of armour on, because there's no black governors there, and to see Michelle standing, I was in awe, because she wasn't standing as somebody she was the leader. She was the one who was managing the whole sort of thing. And I've kind of followed her career ever since then. And then at one of the Precious Knights Awards, I saw her recognise that she did coaching, and that was it for me. It was about coaching. So and she's been helping me with my coaching me executively for about the last year or so now, isn't it? And so absolutely amazing. So just real quick. So tell us about your career and how you went from track to inspirational speaker.
Oh, thank you very much. It's brilliant to be here today with all of you and to be in community. I never take these spaces for granted. So I'm up here speaking, but I know each and every one of us has a really powerful story to tell. So I am a former athlete. I took up athletics from the age of 9, and I stopped in my mid-20s. And sport and athletics has been a big part and a big driver for me in my career. It has given me my sports mindset, and that has meant that I've kind of really been a very high achiever in lots of things that I've done. But mostly it was so identity affirming. So as a young brown-skinned girl, I needed to find a place where I felt safe. And my athletics was that place where I was surrounded by black and brown people that looked like me. And so athletics holds this, and it held such an identity-affirming space and presence in my life. And I trained with amazing athletes and had a great coaches, but I never made it to the international stardom that I dreamt of and wanted. And so I often describe myself as a failed athlete. And everyone goes, oh my God, she's used the word failed. How could she? But actually, I love talking about failure. I love talking about losing, because that is the part of success. And for me, my whole career has been littered with magnificent mistakes and lots of failures. And it started from my athletics days. But what my athletics taught me was so much about resilience, because when I would lose a race at the weekend, I was still turning up to train 3-4 times a week in the hope that I would win my next race. And that has really stood me in great stead. I have to be really clear, I wasn't this amazing entrepreneur who had this crazy pioneering idea as a young person. Nope, not at all. I had no idea what I needed to do, what I wanted to do. And my dad, very strict West Indian man from Guyana, said, you need to make a decision, you need to make it quick, right? And you've got to get going with this. And I love young people, and I loved sport. And so I decided to become a teacher very early on. I taught in a school in Brixton for 4 years. I got really disillusioned very quickly as the only woman of colour on the staff workforce. I then quickly went into a job after 4 years as a community sport manager working for Charlton Athletic Race Equality Partnership, which was a partnership programme, innovative and pioneering of its time, set up in direct response to the murders of Stephen Lawrence, Roland Adams and Rohit Dagao, and I always honour their names. And my job was to work with black and ethnic minority communities and get them sports qualified, accredited, and get them jobs in the football club, and to use the power of football to deliver anti-racism and education work. And so my advocacy and activism and campaigning work started way back then. And I was then headhunted into a new role working with a school to become a director of community. And eventually I became an assistant head teacher in that role, because the work that I was doing was having such a massive impact on the whole school community that the head teacher recognised that I had all these different skills, as we do as black and brown folk, right? We have to be really ingenious, we have to be innovative. And I was able to relate to the students, to the teachers, to the hoodlums on the estate, to the funders, to these like VIPs I was bringing into the school, to the local authority. And the head teacher was like, "You've got these skills, Michelle." This head teacher was incredible. And that's what started my whole thing around leadership. She saw my potential in ways that I didn't see. And she promoted me to an assistant head teacher. Now, I had no business being an assistant head teacher. I had not been a head of department. I'm not even secondary school trained. But the work that I was doing was having such an amazing impact on the community in the school and out externally, that this gave me the platform to make massive change in all kinds of ways in terms of health and well-being. And then, as with anything, when your values misaligned, that head left, a new head came on board, and our values didn't match up. It was a very, very masculine way of leading the school community, and I was very much about distributed and collegiate leadership in how I was working. And I mean, you know, there was something, I think physically, I'm 6'1.5". That's a really important half an inch, and he was like 5'1", and so there was always a problem. There was always a problem when we stood next to each other, and he felt that, I think. So there was something there. I might be making that up or reshaping history a little bit, but I do think that was a part of the discourse, because our physicality actually is so important. And I've been called, "You're too much, Michelle, you're too intimidating, you're too direct, you're too unflinching," when I'm saying very straight things. But because I'm saying it with some presence, and because I'm 6'1.5", it is received in a particular way. And later on in my career, then I worked for the local authority, and I was managing, and that's where I was managing all kinds of curriculum areas. And I met Jacy. I was managing governor services. I went in and managed everything to do with school sport and PE and health, and everything to do with the Olympics. I hope this is still working. And I became a bit of a troubleshooter, senior exec in that role. And that's what happens when you become really good at what you do and you're overperforming. You're like, "Well, can you just sort out that dysfunctional team over there, Michelle? Can you do this? Can you do that?" And it was quite a difficult and a challenging space for me at different times, because I'd got this sports mindset of very high performing, and I was working with teams who weren't used to that, who weren't necessarily used to being held to account. And so it really brought up lots of different issues for me, and I had to kind of really transform a lot of my leadership style. So I will talk about that a little bit later on. And then kind of, you know, a little bit later on in that journey, I realised I didn't want to be an assistant director. I didn't want to be a CEO. So what do I want to do? And, you know, as life does, it kind of gives us, our life is always talking to us in signs, right? Always, always. So I was very sadly, I suffered a series of consecutive bereavements in my family, and it really made me question my purpose and what I'm offering to the world. And at the same time, I was receiving quite a lot of challenging feedback from my staff about my style of leadership. And that was hard, because as black and brown folk, we have to wade through some of the racialized and gendered tropes that are played out to us and try to find the truth. And the truth was that I needed to adapt some of my style. And I went on that journey of giving up some of my power, creating a much more conscious leadership way of working, and which resulted in me becoming an award-winning manager at one point. And I really kind of went on that journey. But I did question, what was I doing and why was I doing it? And then I decided to just back myself. And I asked my managers for consolidated hours to develop my consultancy on the side. They refused, obviously, a black woman asking for something at a senior level. And so I took the hit. I took the hit financially and gradually went part-time and developed my consultancy on the side. And that was, 12 years ago. So I was just doing my work part-time, 4 days a week, 3 days a week, and then eventually in 2017, I went full-time. And then 2 years later, I was asked to write a book. I've written a book. It's in the brochure. I forgot to bring a copy. I'm being self-compassionate. These things happen. And I've been doing advisory consulting, coaching individuals within their own professional environments creating psychological safety for us as black and brown people in the way it wasn't afforded to me in my leadership journey, and working with people to ensure that they are able to develop their leadership potential. So that's a real whistle-stop tour of my work. I'm also an activist. I claim that. I'm a campaigner. I work a lot in sport, calling out the injustices that I see, especially around the lack of representation.
Wow, indeed. So interestingly, just going on from that, I think, Bibi just sort of mentioned about going from employee to...
So we just need to clarify, is that 10 minutes? So I've got 10 minutes on the stage. 10 minutes left.
All right, cool. All right, so just we've seen that leadership journey from being an employee. How do you get from employee to, did you have an idea that you were going into entrepreneurship and going to set up your own business and do your own thing? How do you transition between the two?
No, I didn't. I just knew that what I was doing wasn't kind of making me happy, wasn't bringing me the peace that I needed. And so at that point, in the role that I was doing at that time, I was operating like a CEO, and I was continually reshaping and reinventing what I was doing. This job wasn't making me happy. Okay, let me do something else. Let me create a program around education and social justice. Let me create a program around going into schools and developing assemblies around health and well-being and bringing in diverse role models, all the black and brown people that I can think of into all of these white schools. So I was doing things that would bring me joy. But at some point, you become so uncomfortable in that space that you have to make a leap. And so I read this book, and it was a book called Halftime, and it was my cousin, Sasha, who told me to read this book. And it was a very Christian book, and I wasn't sure, although I'm a believer, I wasn't sure that this was for me, but there was one nugget in this book, and it's often the way you go to a course, you read loads of books, and there's often just one nugget. And this nugget for me was, if you have been doing a job for over a decade, you should be successful at it, right? You should be successful at it. So I've seen nods, great, you're right. If you've been doing a job for a decade, you should be good at it. If you're not, there's some serious problems going on. You should be able to turn down your percentage effort, your intensity levels, right the way down if you're a high performer, right? And it was like, it was like an Oprah aha moment for me. I was like, right, I'm working for this organisation like it's my own business. This is crazy. The book tells you to go down to 50%. Because of my levels of expectation and how I work in terms of high performance, I went down to 20%, and it was good enough. I developed my consultancy on the side I was doing crazy things, absolutely. I was getting up at 5, I was working from 5 to 8 in the mornings, and I was going off to my 9 to 5 and doing that, and then doing my job doing my consulting stuff in the evenings. I won awards working like that. People thought that I was a full-time consultant and advisor, and I wasn't. I was somebody that was just backing myself, and then eventually I went part-time, and I was able to, and then became full-time after that. But I was able to develop my influence with people that were a part of my cheerleading squad. So those are the people that we have in our spaces, and some of them are in the room today, that talk about you when you're not in the room, that say, you know what, you should get Michelle Moore on that stage. Jacy, you did that today, because she's got something to offer. And so I was able to just go out there in the world and say, look, the work that I do is about trying to support people on their journeys. I found a gap, actually, where I go to the organisations and the people that I know the most who work in corporate, in the public sector, and say to those bosses, you're not supporting and accelerating the progress of black and brown people in your organisation. What coaching are you offering? What mentoring support are you offering? Oh, look, those are those organisations that have no black and brown coaches in them as a part of their roster. How can you be possibly supporting our communities navigating the intersections of oppression if you're not offering any kind of representation? And so I found that niche in the market for myself, and then I offer a very specific consulting. We're in this together. I'm your sports captain. We're working together. There's a plan here. These are not abstract and academic conversations. They're about challenging you to kind of fulfill your leadership potential. And a lot of the reason why I'm able to kind of navigate this space is because I have a very strong why. My gran came here from Guyana in 1952, right? And she didn't come here so that I could kind of play around, that I could be unhappy in a job that isn't going to really embrace all of the leadership qualities and all of the magnificence that is Michelle Moore. I own it, right? I've been on that journey. I'm nearly 50 now. So I own my success. And so she came here and she told, and she went through so much of the kind of struggle that it makes me want to make sure that the work that I do is in legacy and in tribute to her. So I often start, I don't care where I am, if I am doing a PowerPoint, because I don't really like PowerPoints, as you can tell, I often start with a picture of my gran from Guyana and my granddad, who was a very significant people in my life.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay, so, yeah, let me see. So real wins. How did it come about and what is it about?
So Real Wins is about my journey as a young woman who wanted to become an athlete, who didn't become the athlete that I wanted to, and the leadership lessons that I learned along the way in terms of my professional career. My sport taught me so much about mindset, about externalizing fear, about managing our emotions, about resilience, and about finding a way through despite the injustices that we experience as black and brown people in the world. And so my leadership journey has been complicated and enriched by my identity. And the book contains tools of resistance for us as black and brown people, but it also contains leadership lessons for white conscious people who want to get it right. So it's about conscious leadership, and it's about how we can all step up for ourselves, and in doing so, we're enabled to step up for other people. So as you can tell, I get bored really easily. So my book, it opens, every chapter opens with a story and then goes into a leadership theme and then pulls out some of the real nuggets that I've gleaned from the athletes and the amazing business leaders that I've interviewed in the book. And it's not a traditional leadership book because I refuse to be defined by the narrow constructs of the publishing industry. I refuse to be defined by gendered and racialized tropes. I refuse to be defined by the narrow constructs of womanhood. I am unmarried and don't have any children and have no problem with that. Sometimes when I do talks, especially in schools, that's one of the first questions I get asked. And so the book is untraditional, right? And it is supposed to be. It's not supposed to fit into any of those lines. I define my own boundaries and I exist outside of them. It ends with a poem in tribute to my gran about her independence. And somebody questioned me the other day and said, well, you know, it's a non-fiction leadership book, Michelle. How could you end it with a poem? And I said, that's the whole point. It's not supposed to be like everybody else's book. It's my book. It's about real wins. It's about how we define success for ourselves, not by anybody else's diversity and inclusion rhetoric, not by an organisation's idea or expectation of us. It's how we take power, stand in that power, stand tall is one of the chapter titles, and own it. And defining and having that clarity means that I can determine what goes in my book and how it's, you know, and how that's interpreted by me as the author. So it's really important to me that I've written this book because I often feel censored and uncensored. And as somebody who's approaching, I keep saying this and I need to stop saying it like half a century, but you know, there's something about approaching 50 that makes you actually much more bold, much more like, I'm unapologetic. I don't have that in me anymore because I've been saying the same thing in a different way for a long time. And so this is my truth. And the book is just an extension of that and another message in which I can get the work that I'm trying to do out there in the world. And it's a business tool. Absolutely, I stand in it. And I would like people to read it, but I'm not defined by and getting confused by honours and achievements, right? The book has been shortlisted for awards. It's just been longlisted for a Chartered Management Book of the Year out of like 150 books. Only like 20 were selected, and they told me, and I was really surprised. And I said, oh, that's cool, but you know, let me see the ethnic diversity and the representation of the people judging. And they're like, this Michelle Moore, she's so troublesome. But you know, at the end of the day, I'm not defined by how many Amazon reviews that I get or how many numbers of people buy the book. I'm defined by the impact that the work has. And I've been able to go out there in the world, and because of the way in which the media works and the publishing industry, it's really down to the authors to make their success. So all of when you check me out online and what have you, all of the kind of media and the fact that I got myself a billboard campaign, I was on like the Hammersmith flyover with this massive billboard in my face, and the book is all down to hustling, all down to my efforts, doing my work in the world, and people being drawn to that, and then enabling opportunities to come off the back of that.
Fantastic. Just one last question. Where can you find the book?
It's Waterstones, Amazon's, all good retailers. My website is the best place to do it because then that drives traffic to me. I'm unequivocally will promote me first and foremost.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michelle Moore.